Good
I just
afternoon.
lost you.
Good
Hello.
afternoon.
We see you.
Mr. Dixon, we see you.
All right,
And
but the video just got lost.
No, we see you.
Okay, but I don't see y'all.
okay, up in the right-hand corner, you have the choice of either gallery view or speaker view. Up in the right-hand corner of the box, there's 3 options there. There's gallery view, speaker. There's a little wheel for your settings, and then it can expand the window. So,
All right, I think what it is that patch that when I went to click out of it, it messed it up.
Okay, we can see you and hear you.
yep, we
Okay.
can see you and hear you. So if you can,
All right, you want me to start?
Yes.
Okay.
give me 1 second to just we're streaming now, and the purpose of this special called meeting is to determine the board conduct or the conduct regarding a BIDA board member, Ms. Sabrina Willis, and to present the information regarding this particular situation. The city solicitor, Mr. Dixon, is here, and so I will turn it over to you at this time, Mr. Dixon.
All right. Thank you, Madam Mayor. As the mayor indicated, the purpose of this hearing is to hear evidence pertaining to allegations made against Ms. Sabrina Willis concerning obtaining homestead exemptions on 3 different properties in College Park in violation of state law. Now, Ms. Willis, at the conclusion of the presentation of evidence, the mayor and council will vote on whether or not to remove you from the BIDA board. You will be given an opportunity to make a statement and present evidence on your own behalf, and understand that you're represented by counsel, Mr. Ricardo Mosby. This is an administrative hearing. The burden of proof is on the city to show by slight evidence that there is just cause to remove you from the BIDA board. And just cause basically means misconduct reflecting discredit to the BIDA board and its mission. The allegations against Ms. Willis is that she on 3 different occasions filed for and received homestead exemptions on 3 different properties in violation of the Official Code of Georgia 48-5-40. Now, we have received, and I believe that y'all have it in your packet, certified records obtained from the Fulton County Board of Tax Assessors. And there's a letter that's presented that's signed by Florence Brooks that basically says, to whom it may concern, per our tax records, the above referenced taxpayer has been claiming homestead exemptions on the reference property for several years. If you require additional information, you may contact me. The first homestead exemption was filed in the year of 2000 for property located at 3524 Victoria Street in College Park. On this particular property, there is no application, and I believe that the explanation from the Fulton County Tax Assessor's Office was that because of the age, that they did not have records indicating or an application for the property. But there was a homestead exemption filed. Now, when this homestead exemption was filed, there were no other properties owned by Sabrina Willis. The second homestead exemption was filed for a property located at 3505 Victoria Street. Do y'all still hear me okay? I don't see anything now on my screen.
We can hear you just fine.
Okay.
Yes.
The property at 3505 Victoria Street, there was a homestead exemption application that was filed on May the 30th of 2003 in the name of Sabrina Willis. And if you look in your packet, there is an application, a paper application for that particular piece of property. If you find it, there is a question on the application. Are you claiming homestead on any other property? And Ms. Willis answered no. So at the time that the homestead exemption was filed for 3505 Victoria Street, there was already in effect a homestead exemption that had been filed for 3524 Victoria Street. The third application was a application that was filed online. And it was filed for a property located at 1926 John Calvin Avenue. And the name used for that was Sabrina Willis. However, the spelling is different. If you look at the application, it's an online application. It's in your packet. It was filed on the date of March 31st, 2011. And if you go online to look at the online application, it clearly has instructions to follow when you file for the application. And there is a link that you have to click on before you can even do the application process. And there is a question or a statement that has to be checked that says, I do not currently claim a homestead exemption on another property. And above that, in the application process, it says, by law, you and your spouse, if you have one, can only claim the homestead exemption on one property. In order to proceed with the application, verify that you do not currently claim a homestead exemption on any other property. At the time that application for homestead exemption was filed, there were currently 2 other homestead exemptions on property owned by Ms. Sabrina Willis. So in effect, there were 2 homestead exemptions that were filed. The homestead exemption for 3505 Victoria Street, which was filed in 2003. And when that was filed, there was already a homestead exemption on file in Fulton County. Then the homestead exemption for the 1926 John Calvin Avenue was filed in 2011. So when that was filed, there was presently already 2 homestead exemptions that had been filed on property owned by Ms. Willis. Now, according to the law, in the Official Code of Georgia Annotated, 48-5-45 permits an individual to claim a homestead exemption so long as they qualify according to the requirements found in the Official Code of Georgia Annotated, section 48-5-40. This statute states that in the event an individual who is an applicant owns 2 or more dwelling houses, he shall be allowed the exemption granted by law on only one of the houses. Only one homestead shall be allowed to one immediate family group. Therefore, no matter how many properties an individual owns, the individual may only claim one homestead exemption. If an individual makes a false or fraudulent claim for exemption when claiming a homestead exemption, then this is an unlawful act, and any person who violates this code section shall be guilty of a misdemeanor. In addition, the property shall be taxed in the amount double the tax otherwise to be paid. And that's the basic law governing the situation that Ms. Willis finds herself in. Now, the significance of what Ms. Willis has done and how it relates to whether or not cause has been shown to remove Ms. Willis from office is that she sits on the BIDA board. And as you know, the BIDA board has very broad authority. The purpose of the BIDA board is to attain development and promote for the public good and general welfare, trade, commerce, industry, and employment opportunities, and to promote the general welfare of the community of College Park. The broad authority is acquired, broad authority to acquire, develop, lease, sell, and dispose of real and personal property, to contract for and develop projects necessary or convenient to the accomplishment of BIDA's purpose. And that would be things such as Airport City or 6 West, which is $1 million development. BIDA may also exercise the power of eminent domain, condemnation, and may issue revenue bonds with the approval of mayor and city council. So the BIDA board has a broad power in the properties that are within the city of College Park. And to have a BIDA board member who has violated the law as relates to property taxes, I believe that there would be just cause at that particular time. Now,
I'm not hearing any audio.
I think
Are
Mr.
you-
Nick is reviewing.
I quit talking for just a minute. I'm fixing to start back up. Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Okay. Ms. Willis has violated Georgia law and very possibly could be charged with a misdemeanor. Now that charging decision would be something that the Fulton County Board of Tax Assessors would have to decide. But in effect, what she's done is cheated the county and the city to a certain extent out of tax revenue because of the fact that she had homestead exemptions on these properties. She paid less in taxes than she actually owed. And because of the control that they have over property, it would, I think, put the BIDA board in a harmful position to have Ms. Willis continue to be on the board. A board member should at all costs avoid even the appearance of impropriety. Once it's known to the community that Ms. Willis has filed the 3 homestead exemptions when she's only entitled to 1, the credibility of the BIDA board and the important work they do for the citizens of College Park is compromised and discredited. Simply put, it looks bad and affects the character of the BIDA board. For those reasons, just cause exists to remove Ms. Willis from the board. I'm sure Ms. Willis has done a good job over the past 11 years, but because of the circumstances surrounding her actions, I think it would be appropriate to remove her to avoid this appearance of impropriety of someone on the BIDA board. And are there any questions?
Councilman Clay, you said you had some questions earlier.
Yes, I had a number of questions, actually, and comments. I don't know whether comments are appropriate or not. How are we handling this?
If you have questions for Mr. Dixon at this point, I think that would be appropriate, but we need to give Ms. Willis and her attorney an opportunity to share their position on this matter as well. So we can hold comments until a little bit later.
Okay. One of the questions I had was, and this is the one that needed to be researched, Terrence, was that while I've been on council, and my memory doesn't serve me as to what the exact situation was, there was action taken by council with regard to Favor House. And that's the 1926 property. I thought at one time, either the city had owned it or that the city had done something with it, and it was being treated as a non-residential property. And so one of my questions was, how is this property listed on the books? Is it residential? Is it registered as a nonprofit? I know Favor House, I believe, is registered as a nonprofit, but this is not a question for Sabrina. This is a question for the city. What action did the council take with regard to that property? I don't remember, and I wanted Shavela to look it up, and that's why I sent it to you, Terrence, and said send it to Shavela and whoever else needs to research that. The other question I had was, why is the property at 3524, does that have an over 65 exemption? Because you can tell from the amount of money that was deducted on the taxes that it was an over 65 exemption. And lastly, I know that I did look back at some of the minutes, and I noted when she came before council to make public comment, I noted that Ms. Willis listed her address as 1927 Victoria. And that is, so if that's her place of residence, then why is 1926? And I wanted that researched. I don't have the specific, I didn't take the time to go through and list all the council meetings where that occurred. And that's what I wanted to get from Shavela.
Right. And again,
those are my
Councilman,
questions.
let me apologize for that. It was Saturday evening. You sent that information. We were. So as far as the 1926 address, it is regarded as a residential property. There was no action formally taken by the city of College Park to declare it otherwise. Favor House was recognized as that address, but in terms of the property tax records in that held by Fulton County government and such, it is a residential property.
Okay, and does anybody have any insight into, Shavela, do you have any insight into the 1927 being declared as the location that Ms. Willis lived at?
No, I do not. I can get with Philip Latona to see if he had that information, but that won't be till tomorrow.
Okay, well, there were several occasions, I didn't note them all, but there were several occasions where those were cited as an address. That may have been an accident. I don't know. I just was trying to dig into the information and do a thorough analysis. That's all I had.
Okay, any other questions from council? Mr. Dixon, anything else?
No, and maybe Miss Willis could clear up where exactly she lives when she addresses mayor and city council.
I had a question on the senior. Do you have to be 65 to apply for that? How does that work?
It's my understanding that for the 65 and older, you have to also meet an income requirement. If your income is over a certain amount, then you don't qualify for the 65 and older homestead
Yeah.
exemption.
You have a separate, do you apply separately for a 65 exemption?
I believe you do.
Anything else, Councilman Allen?
That's it.
Okay. Any other questions from any other members of council? All right, Mr. Mosby?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you
All
so
right.
much.
Yep.
First of all, good afternoon, members of council and Mr. Dixon and all other individuals involved in this call. I appreciate your time. My biggest concern is that this looks like a vendetta, and I'm not sure why or from whom. What I can tell you is that Mr. Dixon did point out very aptly, number one, there is no physical application or evidence for 3424 Victoria. That is because Ms. Willis never affirmatively applied for anything. Yes, the H11 designation is for people that are 65 or older with a certain income. That was done by the prior owner of the property before Ms. Willis acquired it. So I would respectfully ask, since there's no evidence at all that she applied for anything on that one, that be removed from the discussion. But I'll let you all determine whether or not you want to do that. The second thing is that this is exactly what I heard someone say. There's a mistake. This was an error. Let me be clear about where she lives so we don't have any question of that. Ms. Willis lives at 1926 John Calvin Avenue. And that is her address. She has never lived at 3424 Victoria Street, nor 3524. I apologize. And we get all these numbers running together. So if I make a mistake, I hope that no one holds that against Ms. Willis, because I may make a mistake with all these numbers and addresses. So 3524, she acquired but never lived in. So she did not apply for a homestead exemption. And that homestead exemption followed the property until someone was to affirmatively make a change, and she didn't do that. With regards to 3505 Victoria Street, yes, she did live there. And she purchased that property in 1982, but didn't apply for the homestead exemption until 2003. So the criminal that we're talking about, who would have taken all of this money, why would you wait all of these years to do that? What you have is an error, ladies and gentlemen. What you have is the same thing I did with my Fulton County taxes when I forgot to pay them. What you have is no intent. And Mr. Dixon knows full well, in order for a criminal charge to sit, you have to prove the intent. And Ms. Willis had no such intent. What I can tell you is this: I've never seen anyone move so swiftly to exact the kind of results that I believe are already determined before we even finish, because this seems like some kind of vendetta. Because here's the question for you that I want you to consider. Ms. Willis has been on this board for 11 plus years and owned these properties for this full amount of time. And I don't see any indication that anybody went and looked through the tax records to determine whether she or any other member of the BIDA board had these issues, whether they paid their water bills or tax bills. Nobody's done that until this time when someone wanted to remove her from the board. Number three, you are correct, Mr. Dixon, and I spoke directly with Ms. Florence Brooks myself. And I will tell you what she said to me, since it won't be considered hearsay, because this is not a forum, it's not a court. Number one, Ms. Florence Brooks said to me she has never seen as much fervor over anything as she's seen over this. And she indicated to me that the city, and this is what she said to me, and I will do a sworn affidavit, that the city had a vendetta and that they were going after her because the process is exactly what Mr. Dixon explained. And that is, if a person has more than one homestead exemption, the process is that the county will go to that person, assess them for 3 years, and then they have to pay double, which I want to point out to everyone on this call, Ms. Willis has done. So there should be no reason for any solicitor, misdemeanor, felony, or any other thing of that nature because she's taking care of the problem. Now, there was a mistake by Mr. Lee during the BIDA board meeting where he said that her paying means that that's an admission of guilt, and that's ridiculous. And there is no admission of guilt. What there is the fixing of an issue and a problem. So I'm not really sure what else I could say, but I can say to you this. This situation has existed from the day that Ms. Willis became a member of the board. And if Ms. Willis were to be of detriment to the board for owning these 3 properties, that probably would have happened by now. She is of no detriment to the board. She's done nothing wrong. She made an error like many of us do. And I'm sure you've heard the saying, if you look for something, you're going to find it. Nobody's looked into my history, but if they did, I'm sure they could find something. I'm sure they could do that with all of us. What I'm saying to you is there was no untoward activity, that Ms. Willis has done everything above board, including her public service to this board. And for her name to be besmirched like this in such a concerted effort brings about a number of concerns. There is case law. And if anybody was on this council in 2007, there was a case where the state indicated that, well, the court indicated, that the BIDA board members do not serve at the pleasure of the mayor or of the council. The statute was created by the state and the removal procedures should be created by the state. There is no cause here. There is an accident. There was a mistake which has been corrected. So if it is the position of this board that anyone can be removed at any time for a mistake that they would make, the first question I would ask, under the laws of the United States Constitution and the Georgia Constitution, has due process been applied where all of the BIDA board members have been looked at and all of their properties and their taxes have been looked at to determine whether or not something that they've done would besmirch this board? Because I think what you have is 11 plus years of activity, which will tell you exactly who Ms. Willis is. But like I said, I believe that this is a foregone conclusion because this was convened very quickly. And, you know, all I can say to you is this, Madam Mayor, if you have the authority to appoint somebody, which you do, and I don't question that, if you have the authority to appoint somebody and this was not your appointment, the time to have done that would have been to appoint someone for the date for an appointment to be set. It wouldn't be after she's been approved and then try to remove her by, and I'm not saying that you did this, Madam Mayor, with all due respect, but someone who possibly—
If you're not, excuse me, Mr. Mosby, if you are not saying that I did something, then I would appreciate you not directing your comments in that way, in that manner.
But what I'm going to say to you is this. Maybe someone who supports you or is a supporter of someone else feels that this is what needs to be done, but this is libelous and slanderous and defamatory, because to call my client a criminal when there is a process in place, because obviously the Board of Assessors would not have a process in place if this didn't happen on a normal basis. In fact, I actually reached out to a couple of Board of Tax Assessors, including Gwinnett and Cobb County, and they have similar processes when people make mistakes like this, because this happens. So I want to be clear. You guys will make the decision that you want to make, but this is unfair. This is pointed and directed at one individual and one individual only. And it is not justice. It is not right. But I will tell you this. She has corrected this issue. So there should be no reason for any discussion of any criminal proceedings, except for the fact that I understand that someone has been called in Fulton County to ask them to pursue Ms. Willis. And I just don't understand why this is so important that you remove her at this point when we've got 40,000 dead people, an economy that's down because of the coronavirus. This is the most important thing that we have to do in College Park. So that's what we have to say. Ms. Willis has done nothing wrong. She has not done anything clearly. She has not done anything intentional. And for a criminal act to stay and to be instituted, you must be able to prove her intent. And she didn't intend to do anything except for make a mistake, which obviously others have done. She has taken care of that. And we respectfully ask that if you're going to remove her, that you go ahead and look at all of the board members and make sure that they don't have the same issue so that they can get the exact same process that Ms. Willis is getting today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mosby. Anything else to add, Mr. Dixon?
Madam Mayor, I would just say it goes back again to the appearance of impropriety. And I think in this particular case, that's what we have. It appears that what Ms. Willis did was improper. And that would be all I'd have to indicate. And I know Mr. Mosby talked about what the Board of Tax Assessors person said about College Park, but that's hearsay. I mean, we have a letter from her where she clearly said that Ms. Willis had the 3 properties. And I believe that's all I have unless anyone has any more questions. Yeah.
Okay. Does any member of council have any questions for Mr. Mosby?
Yes, I guess I do. What was the amount of the tax repayment? Was it double as required by the law?
Oh, I have to ask them. Hold on. Well, they're sitting here with me, sir. What did you pay? It was a little over $3,000, and their understanding is that it was assessed at double. But I'm not sure about that, so I don't want to misrepresent.
And they paid College Park also $3,000.
And they also paid College Park, Mr. Willis is telling me.
$3,000.
Yeah, I did some analysis on the tax filing, the assessment, the annual assessment notice, and the reduction for 3505, at least in 2019, looked to me to be $300. The reduction for 3524 looked to be roughly a bit more than $700. And the other reduction for 3526, I think, turned out to be something like $800. I'm looking for it in my notes here and I don't quite see it. But so what I don't know is, what the savings were over the past 10 years or so when these deductions have been, or these exemptions have been in place. But that would be, if something were over 10 years at $800 or $700, that'd be about $7,000, $8,000. And if you doubled that, that would be something much bigger. That was another thing I wanted to check, was whether that analysis was correct, but I think it is, looking at the form. Has anybody else taken a look at that?
If I might respond, I don't want to speak over anyone. Well, number one, and I hear what you're saying, Councilman, but what I was told by Ms. Brooks, subject to hearsay, Mr. Dixon, what I was told by Ms. Brooks, which I said in my presentation, is they go back 3 years. This is what Ms. Brooks told me. So she didn't go back 10 years. That's my understanding, but I don't want to misrepresent or speak out of turn. My understanding is when a situation like this happens, they go back 3 years and make the person pay double. But I cannot verify that. I would have to speak directly with Ms. Brooks about that, but that's what was represented to me. And what my client is telling me is she paid what they told her to pay.
Yeah, well, okay, and I understand that.
Mr. Mosby, may I ask a question?
Yes, ma'am.
So it looks like the last filed request for a homestead exemption was back in 2011. So your client is it a correct statement that your client has not paid anything beyond 3 years of back taxes?
Again, I don't want to make an incorrect statement. This is what was represented to me, but I would have to clarify with Ms. Brooks exactly what they assessed. I don't know for sure.
Thank you. Councilman Clay, I apologize if I interrupted.
No, that's okay. If you look at what I just ran off, these are true for all three properties. These exemptions were true for all three properties at the same time, apparently over the last 3 years. And so that would be about $700 plus another 300 would be 1,000 plus another 1820. So you're talking about 1,800 per year for 3 years. So that'd be about $6,000 or so. I don't remember the amount that you said, Mr. Mobley, that was paid.
And
But if you,
what I was told was it was, and I don't know if they split it up because again, I'm not in the tax assessor's office, but it was my understanding it was 3,000 or so which went to the county, and then 3,000 or so that went to the city. Now I don't know if she paid all of that to them. I can let her answer that question, but I don't want to misrepresent anything to you all.
Okay. Any other questions? Any discussion?
I've been doing all the talking. I look to hear from somebody else.
Sorry.
I'm concerned about the senior. The senior, you have to actually apply for that? Do you have to prove that you're over 65 or how to?
I do not know if you have to prove it, but I know you have to actually apply for that designation. That I do know.
You have to
I don't know.
You have to submit a birth date or anything like that to show that you're 65?
I'm not sure, but I can assure you, sir, that Ms. Willis has submitted nothing on 3524 Victoria. That's what I'm saying. I'm saying that that was submitted prior to her acquiring the property.
Do we know the age of the person that was owned the property before her?
Yes, we do.
We have, yes. She is Susie Bridges. You got it.
Her name is Susie Bridges,
And she was 72 years old.
and she was 72 years old at the time they acquired the property from her.
And that's
So I don't know when she applied for it, but when they acquired the property, she was 72. And in addition, I wanted to let you all know that the deed that I have says that Ms. Bridges was incapacitated. So I'm not even sure whether or not that was an estate representative who did that. So I don't really want to speak too much to that because I'm not sure what happened prior to my client acquiring the property.
And on the monies that she paid to the city of College Park, did she pay that based on what the city said, or how did that work? Did she go up and
It was what was it not the county tax assessor or
County taxes did theirs, and then the city.
okay? They're telling me that both the city and the county gave them the amount that they had to pay.
For the
Phil,
past 3 years.
Phil, the tax assessor. I don't know who that is. So. But I do have the bills for payment if you guys need that for consideration.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, seeing no questions. Any other comments?
I would respectfully ask Madam Mayor that before a rash decision is made, if you guys need to see a copy of what was paid, if you need to look into anything else, that you take the opportunity to do that before a citizen who has served for 11 plus years is removed from a board that she has contributed to significantly. That's the only thing that I would ask.
Any comment from anyone else?
I'd like to hear from Councilman Gay and Councilman Taylor.
Councilman Gay, anything?
I'm just trying to process. I don't have anything at this moment.
Councilman Taylor?
Yeah, I wanted to talk to Mr. Dixon. You said that if she had 3 homestead exemptions and Fulton County would have did something, it would have been like a misdemeanor. So Fulton County did nothing. Once they paid, everything was paid up. It was just over, or is something else going on?
I have no knowledge as to whether anything is going on as far as a criminal matter goes.
Okay.
But the law is pretty specific. If you file a fraudulent homestead exemption, you've committed a misdemeanor, and that would be up to the Fulton County Board of Tax Assessors to file those charges.
Mr. Dixon, is our consideration as a council the same? You said this was an administrative hearing, so certainly not a criminal hearing.
Not a criminal hearing, right?
Can you distinguish that? Distinguish the two?
Well, if it was a criminal matter, then the proof, you'd have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Ms. Willis committed this act. In an administrative, it only takes slight evidence. So the burden of proof is much different in an administrative hearing than it would be in a criminal case. And the consequences, of course, being administrative would be that she's just removed from office, as opposed to a criminal case where there would be a possibility of jail time or a fine or something along those lines, a conviction.
I have a question. Assuming she's removed, what'll be the process to appoint someone else?
I think that would go back to city and to council and
Are you
mayor
asking-
to.
I think that would have to be something that we as a body determine.
I mean, could it be determined contemporaneously with our decision tonight?
I don't think that we're here to consider that, Councilman Gay.
So the question is, we have to come back and then determine how we fill that vacancy?
I think that would.
The charter says how that vacancy is to be filled. There is a process for filling a vacancy on the BIDA board. And we were in that process a few months ago. I assume we'd follow the same process, wouldn't we, Mayor?
I would assume so. Yes, Councilman Clay. I misspoke. I apologize. The BIDA charter does outline that, and I think Mr. Lee is on. He might be able to shed some light on that.
Yeah,
That's
idea.
right.
You could-
That's right, Mayor. It's an at-large seat, and it's a nomination by the board and appointed by the board, by the whole board, not just the district.
Okay.
You mean the BIDA board, sir?
No, mayor and council.
Mayor and council, yes. Okay.
So we make a motion, any one of four of us make a motion. Should she be removed? And that's how the process?
Yes.
No,
Or not.
You meant, right, Councilman Gay, you meant anyone make a motion as to who should be appointed, right?
That's what I'm asking.
Yeah, you said removed, I think, and I thought that's what you meant.
All right. Any other considerations? Councilman Taylor, Councilman Gay?
I'm good.
Okay, at this time, does anyone wish to take any action?
Well, Councilman Allen and I were the ones who made the motion and made the second to the original appointment.
Okay. Do either of you have a motion?
I know it looks bad. I don't know how we judge the intent as mayor and council. I don't know how we go about judging the intent. I agree that it does look bad. I agree that,
Does it, Councilman Allen, do you feel that there is the appearance of impropriety, as Mr. Dixon? Mr. Dixon, can you outline again what, in regard to BIDA, what said that, I think I was taking notes, that we need to avoid the appearance of impropriety, is that correct? And
That's correct. Given the nature of BIDA and what BIDA does in the community, I think that to have a member that has problems with the tax office, with 3 different homestead exemptions, that just looks bad. It looks bad to the BIDA and should avoid the appearance of any impropriety. And even going back to the intent, even she might not have intended to do it, but the appearance is still there. And for that reason, I think a removal would be warranted.
Councilman Allen, were you about to say something?
no, I just, you just said the burden's on the city to prove that, and I'm just trying to, I'm just trying to determine, the state hasn't done anything, and it's a misdemeanor. I'm just trying to look and make sure we're doing everything according to the law. Do we make that judgment?
Well, I think as Mr. Dixon pointed out, this is an administrative hearing. This is not a criminal proceeding. And our concerns in an administrative hearing are different than those of a criminal hearing. The burdens are different, and I think we do need to weigh as a body how this is perceived, not only based upon the merits of this, but the appearance of this, not only to the residents, but those with whom we are dealing on an external basis, as we seek to gain agreements and partnerships with others, both across the city, the county, and perhaps even internationally as we move forward on the 6 West development. It's important for us to make sure that we are maintaining credibility and transparency in our processes as well.
May I ask one question?
Yes, sir.
What is the process for the county when a property changes hands? Obviously, it went from, I can't remember the name of the lady who, I think it was Mr. Willis, said that she was 70-something years old. When that property changed hands from one to the other, does the county not require a new filing?
Just so you know, Councilman, like it carries, and they said it's something that happens quite often. So that's something that happens quite often. That it can carry, just like if you or your wife died and you had a son that stayed in the property, and you had your elderly code on there, and till anyone go down there to sell the property, it still can carry over until it's taken off. It still can carry over. That is something that happens. So you know that.
I believe that under Georgia law, the homestead exemption carries over from one year to the other, as long as the property doesn't change hands. If the property changes hands, I believe there has to be a refiling of the homestead exemption.
It does not. It can carry over. I've been told it can carry over still.
Mayor, if I could add to that,
Yes, Mr. Lee.
for the purpose of this hearing, I submit to you that the annual tax assessment that is produced on each property in every county, including Fulton, every year indicates whether or not it has a homestead exemption on it or the 65 and over exemption on it. So, and then it appears on your tax bill on every property every year, so that a taxpayer would know that they were receiving a homestead exemption or a over 65 tax exemption. How it got on there, yeah, I can see errors happening all the time, but the knowledge of the taxpayer is imputed by the receipt of the tax assessment and by the tax bill on each property annually.
So you're saying, Mr. Lee, that, for example, if I, for somehow, I had a child living at home and that I'm talking about federal taxes now, and the child leaves home and so forth, and I realize it's not the same thing, but if my tax bill came and it said, well, you've got these deductions, and I didn't have a child at home, I would clearly know it. So it's probably a terrible example, I guess. But your point is that it's not possible to not know that you not have the exemption if you look at your tax bill.
That's right. And again, what's striking about this is that it is more than 1 year. So it wouldn't be that I missed it this year, it came next year. It's on the assessment that comes in April or May, and it is on the bill for payment of the tax annually on each property that you have in the county. Whether it should be on there or not should be on there, the fact that it's on there appears both times annually.
If I might, I just want to add that it's an affirmative duty on the person who is the owner at the time to file the exemption. So if Ms. Bridges had the designation of H11 on the property, the H11 stood there until someone affirmatively came and said, I have purchased this property, which is why I pointed out to you that on 3505, although Ms. Willis bought the property in 1982, she didn't actually apply for the exemption until 2003. So the exemption is triggered by the application, which Mr. Dixon aptly read out. She filed an application, and that's what puts the designation there. So, and it may be true that it may be there, but I read my tax bill every year and don't understand most of it except for the amount. So I hear you, but I don't know that everybody is, able to read and understand H11 versus H21 versus any other exemption designation.
The tax bills included in the information packet in which we received indicate homestead yes on each one of these properties. Am I reading that correctly? Like it looks like we got homesteads for the annual notice of assessment from the 2019 tax year on each one. 3524 Victoria, yes, HF11. 3505 Victoria, yes, HF01. And 1926 West John Calvin, yes, HF01. So at least two of them are the same, and they are the two that were filed late, correct? Am I reading those correctly? 3524 is the first one, is that right?
Yeah, well, if you look at the homestead exempt, there's a column that says homestead exempt. Are you looking at the Mayor? You're looking at the Fulton County Notice of Assessment, right?
Yes, it's pages.
Okay.
14.
Well, yeah, I spent some time looking through this, and for example, on that particular one for 3524, there's a exemption of 50,000 for homestead. There's against the Fulton County operating system or operating costs, another 10,000 for bonds, another for Fulton school operations. And the one for bonds is negligible, but the other two, one is $500 and one is $210 roughly. I didn't calculate the math precisely. So yeah, if there's nothing in the column, there's no homestead exemption. That's my way of reading, unless anybody else.
I would concur with that reading.
Madam Mayor, if I might.
Yes, Mr. Denmark.
And obviously my role is merely to advise the mayor and council on these matters, not to take a position or advocate. That's why Mr. Dixon is presenting the case from an advocacy point of view. But in my role as an advisor, I believe it's incumbent upon me to clear up one matter that seems to be the criminal aspect of this alleged behavior. It is not for the mayor and council to determine whether a crime has been committed. That's not what's before you. And I think that we talk about Fulton County hasn't done anything or Fulton County hasn't prosecuted. That's not relevant. This is not a criminal matter, and Fulton County may never, ever prosecute this matter criminally, but that would not remove the issue that's before you this evening. The issue before you this evening is whether there's cause to remove Ms. Willis from the board of BIDA based on this conduct. And so we have to draw a distinction between a criminal matter and a civil matter. In a criminal matter, the prosecutors may elect never to prosecute, or there may be a prosecution, and based on the high burden of proof, the individual may be acquitted of having committed a crime. That is not relevant to the civil matter that's before you. It is not out of the realm of possibility for the criminal authorities to say there is no crime, yet on the civil side, there is the finding of wrongdoing. I always use the simple example of the O.J. Simpson matter, where O.J. Was acquitted on the criminal matter, but he was hit with millions of dollars in civil liability. And so you can, so the criminal matter, it may never happen, or the person may be exonerated on the criminal side, but that has nothing to do with the civil matter that's before the mayor and council this evening. So what would be my advice to the mayor and council is to focus on the civil matter, which is actually before you, whether or not there is cause to remove based on the evidence that's been presented. And that evidence may never find its way to a Fulton County courtroom, may never ever be prosecuted. And if it is, Ms. Willis may be completely acquitted of that, but that would not change the civil matter that's in front of you this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Denmark. Mr. Mosby, I have a question. You indicated that Ms. Willis had owned the property at 3505 Victoria since the early 80s. Is that right?
That's correct. Yes, ma'am.
It appears based upon our packet that it was in the name of Rex Willis until 2002, and that it was transferred into her name in 2002, and then the homestead exemption was applied for in 2003.
Y'all gonna have to clarify that. I mean,
and it looks like it had a homestead exemption in 2001 under the name of Rex Willis, and then Ms. Willis was.
That's because I purchased the house before we got married, and that's the reason why.
So that house actually wasn't in her name in the mid 80s.
Yes, got her name later on, but it wasn't her name initially. Okay. That you're looking at, okay, the answer's there.
I'd like to make a couple comments. I've known Sabrina since I ran against her in the 2007 election for council. And we've worked together off and on since that time. She has done a huge amount for the city in helping the the children in the city through the Favor Track Club, through getting the Kaboom Parks. I think she was on the Kaboom Park board, the company, the Kaboom nonprofit board at one time. And so it saddens me that we're having this discussion because I think she's done a lot of good in the city. The other issue that we have is I had a boss from General Electric who used to say to all his vice presidents, you know, guys, I don't obviously want you to do anything that's illegal, inappropriate, what have you. But I said, we have a higher standard. That's what the president said to me. We have a higher standard. And on Monday morning, if it appears in the newspaper that gives implications against the company that you have done something inappropriate, that's not acceptable either. So that's the dilemma that I have right now personally. And in fact, I even seconded the motion for Sabrina to go on the board. So I'm just speaking personally for myself at this point. It's a difficult and painful decision for me for those reasons. I'm not going to make a vote or make a decision at this point, but those are just my comments. That's a dilemma that I have. But I agree with what Mr. Denmark said, that the issue here is not whether there was a criminal act committed or not. That's not ours to decide. It's more an issue of do we have an issue of impropriety? And I like the comment that Mr. Mobley made. Mr. Mobley made the comment, well, what about all the other people on the BIDA board? So I don't know that anyone else on the BIDA board has done anything or has anything in their background that would warrant a similar discussion. But then again, maybe they do. That doesn't mean that we should decide this issue based on whether they may or may not, but it does speak to perhaps some action that we ought to pursue going forward independent of this issue. That perhaps we ought to review the situation with each of the board members on BIDA. And that's going to be an unpopular, I see a lot of unpopular things, but that's going to be an unpopular thing probably with people. But if you want to be fair, I believe in trying to treat everybody the same way. And if you're going to be fair, maybe that's a separate action we should take, depending on what we do tonight.
And also in the future.
I would agree. I don't think it changes the consideration of the issue before us,
No.
but I would agree that, as your former boss said, that our board members are and should be held to a higher standard.
I think the information that we had got a couple weeks before, listen to everything today, even what Mr. Mobley was saying. I think a lot of this just may be human error in my eyes. I don't see anything that, in my own personal feeling, I don't see anything that she's done wrong to what I've seen today, what I've heard today. I think there's a lot of human error going on with this situation. I just don't know. I feel like that, you know, I think we should just let her stay on the board. I don't think that it was like it was at first. It's two different ball games at this point that I see now. This is my point of view.
Okay.
Councilman
Any other
Gay?
comment?
Well, I've looked at those homestead exemption applications before, and I've often wanted to file homestead exemption myself. One thing that stood out to me was my age. In fact, I often said I'm not old enough to file for age exemption, but there is a property owner's exemption, which gives you a slightly less to pay. I do know for sure that it takes an intent and an effort to fill out another homestead exemption application. I know that for a fact because I've looked at those applications. I've gone down to Fulton County and I've looked at them. I've sat down at the desk with those women who process those applications, and I've also done it online. It takes an effort to file more than one application. A person who knows the law knows that you can only have one exemption. We all know that. So who are we kidding?
Any other comment? Is there a motion at this time? And no one has,
I'm going to move to remove. And
Is there a
that
second?
pains me to do that. And I suspect that Sabrina and Rex will probably dislike me forever. And it pains me for all the reasons I said. But I think that we need to maintain, particularly since we're handling billions of dollars ultimately with the 6 West, as we call it now, not Airport City. I think that that is a situation where we have to maintain absolute integrity. And I've been in office long enough to know that there are a lot of things that go on at the county and the state and various governments that are not totally above board. And so you can say, well, why should we be held to a higher standard here? But I personally have always tried to be as open as I can on things. And I think now that it's come to that, though, that I am making this motion, I'm going to pursue the issue of we need to review everybody on these boards. If we're going to treat Sabrina this way, we're going to treat everybody this way. And I think we need to do that. So I move for removal. Now let's see if anybody else is going to second it.
is there a second?
I'll do a second if it's conditioned on all other BIDA members being looked at. Is that possible?
May I make a proposal for that we charge Mr. Denmark with outlining some criteria by which we would evaluate other board members? When you say just looked at, I would want to have some level of specificity there. Is that okay?
Fair.
Okay. Mr. Denmark, are you okay with that?
Absolutely, Madam Mayor. I can present something like that whenever you tell me you would want to receive it.
Okay. Councilman Clay, is that amendment to your motion amenable?
That's quite acceptable. That's better than that's better than having to have a second motion several days from now.
All right, there's been a motion and a second. Any commentary? Go to a vote. All those in favor of removal of BIDA member Sabrina Willis, say aye.
Aye.
Thanks, she should stay.
Oh, hold on one second. All those opposed?
Aye.
Okay. Any abstentions?
I'll abstain.
Okay, the motion passes with 2 in favor, 1 against, and 1 abstention. Is there any other business to consider in this specially called hearing? Okay, hearing none, I would conclude this hearing, and I think we'll enter into the workshop session, but that is a separate entry. So we would all have to exit from here, and appreciate your time this evening, and we will go into the workshop session momentarily. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I ask Mr. Terrence Moore a question?
Sure.
Do you need me at the work session? I noticed that on the agenda was the issue about the city ordinances and who decide.
Yes, sir. You are to be joining us for that workshop meeting, given the subject matter. Yes.